30th birthday at the BBC. Started at 10 when I was in the post room. And during that time, the technology, the economics of the whole trade changed completely out of recognition. I have to say, there's been hardly any debate, I don't know what it is about me, for the first 29 years about the ethics behind what we do, amongst journalists at least. It may be a huge subject of debate amongst the wider public, but I don't think journalists worried too much about it for the first 29 of those 30 years. And of course, in the last 12 months, all that's changed. I'm going to start by asking the panel about public interest, which seems to be at the heart of a lot of these debates. What is the public interest? Have we come to a different definition?
What the judges say, they engage in what's known as an intense focus. Well, here's what they do. They lick their finger and they put it up in the air because it's very, very difficult, because these are not really legal judgments, Rory, they're moral judgments. Which do you think this particular, well, firstly, do you think this is a form of immorality or not? And then going from, which of course is a moving target, things change, so our attitude to homosexuality is rightly changed. To then, okay, if we decide it is immoral, is it so immoral that it should rob you of your Article 8 right?
You know, Steve Coogan rightly says, there's nothing about what I've ever done professionally that entitles anyone to invade my privacy, and I agree with him. But Mark Wright, in The Only Way is Essex, when he's on the cover of OK talking about the abortion that his ex-girlfriend had, I'm sorry, that's it. You're living your life like an open wound. And we're all entitled now to talk about your private life. We just are. And so, you know, there's a difference between Steve Coogan, an actor who's just acting, and a comedian, and a reality TV star who's literally using their private life. And in the middle of that,
who decides where that border lies? I mean,
well, legally, clearly, the police poor judges have to sit there looking at these things.
What you're really looking at is two different public interests. There's the public interest in preserving privacy, and there's the public interest in free expression and showing people who are complete rotters as being complete rotters. And in the end, those are, I think, moral judgments. And to illustrate how hard that is, in the leading case, the Naomi Campbell case, 9 judges heard that case. What a scary thought that is. Now, of those, a very expensive thought, of those 9 judges, they split 5-4, which is as near as you can get to a 50-50 split in 9. Now, what's interesting about that case is that 5 of them found against Naomi Campbell. So the majority found against her. In fact, the reason why she won is that 3 of the 4 judges that found in her favour were law lords. And since they're big, hairy, and carry more weight, she won. But that illustrates
you get more points for a law lord.
You get more points for it, exactly. And that illustrates how difficult that you know, the judiciary find in balancing that test. One of the best moments in the Campbell trial was Piers Morgan saying that Naomi Campbell's been invading her own privacy for years, which was brilliant, perfect one line encapsulating the law.
It's criminal behaviour, and it was the police that failed. The PCC also failed. But I don't think you need to necessarily change the editor's code of conduct or change the way in which media is self-regulated. I think rather there are questions about why the police didn't investigate. There are questions about where the information was coming from. So we know that, for example, corrupt police, corrupt employees in the civil service, the DVLA, you know, there was all kinds of corruption out there, and journalism was just one small part of a system that was failing.
The law needs to protect good investigative journalists. You know, God help us if that was really, it becomes either uncommercial or illegal. That must not happen.
One of the difficult points about this is you know, good investigative journalism is almost never profitable, and is subsidised by what you might call bad investigative journalism.
Well, I appreciate the commercial side is difficult, but just to illustrate the public interest point, I think going to the MP's expenses is helpful. Because of course, the MP's expenses story was broken because material was stolen.
Yeah.
Now, that was a breach of criminal law too, in exactly the same way as Hackgate was a breach of criminal law. No one would think for a minute, however, that wasn't a legitimate journalistic exercise.
Just going back to the economic argument of we have to allow this invasion of people's privacy because it fuels the steroids.
I mean, we've heard that very powerfully
Yeah.
put by, I think it was Trevor Kavanagh last
That's
week
right.
making that argument.
I mean, the very fact that an industry, which is, to be fair, on its knees and half dead and not functioning, can only function with the steroid of, this, highly dubious activity. Surely we shouldn't be saying, okay, let's protect that industry. We need to face the fact that, certainly tabloid journalism, tabloid newspapers, in the form they are now, are not going to be around for much longer.
I think if you actually listen to Dominic Mohan of The Sun, I thought his submission to the Leveson was interesting because he said, and he's absolutely right, and this is how we work, his celebrity journalists dealing in this tittle-tattle and the invasions of privacy and all that, they have sources, they use sources, good sources, real sources telling them real stuff, and that's where their stories come from. And he's right, the Trevor Kavanagh as well, don't you say, actually, yeah, of course, us getting stories via hacking, illegal means, that invaded people's privacy, who never ever were exposing their private lives anyway to the public, of course we should just admit it was wrong. As far as I'm concerned, it was obviously wrong and silly and stupid and totally backfired. And that's why we're doing this, Leveson is going on now and all of that. But there's no reason why the tabloids shouldn't carry on covering celebrity lives, those celebrities, as I say, who the legal test is, it would be hypocritical of them to complain about invasion of privacy because they're doing it themselves. We all know the difference. I think we all know the difference. I think that will carry on. And I don't see anything wrong with that. And I think that's where, people who do see something wrong with that, well, they're just kind of being rather snobbishly looking down upon that whole strata of celebrity news and gossip that is facilitated by the celebrities themselves. I think people say the tabloids, newspaper industry is on its knees. Actually, the broadsheets are losing huge amounts of money, and there's a problem for them. But actually, the Mirror, the Sun, and the Mail are still selling huge numbers, actually. The tabloids are not dead, and they're not even dying. They will still be around for many, many years to come. We need them.
Press regulation has been, it has all sorts of problems, the PCC. But one of the things that's holding it below the waterline is that Desmond's taken his titles out of it. So the Star on Sunday, the Express on Sunday, and OK are all out of the PCC regulation. So it cannot work in its current form. What do we do? And this was a recurring theme. Now, one of the interesting things about Desmond, of course, is that he essentially has three platforms. He's got Channel 5, he's got the orthodox print titles, and he's got his news websites. Now, I raised the question because I was the only person, I may not get out of here alive, but I was the only person on Wednesday at Leveson to suggest that maybe the way now to look at it, given the amount of conversion we have, is just to treat him as a publisher. It doesn't matter what platform he's publishing through. And since we have an imperfect but a regulator in the form of Ofcom, that nobody regards as a threat as government, as any form of government censorship, and works to a degree. If you said to Desmond, right, you're a publisher in all your various platforms, in the 21st century, particularly we're going to have smart televisions, there's no sense in you being regulated differently in the various ways in which you produce content, you're now under Ofcom. And my own question, I think, is that since if you go onto the Sun website, you're looking at a broadcaster. There's footage on there. What really is the difference, and what therefore is the logic in a traditional broadcaster like ITV having to compete with the Sun? For if you've got a tablet, you're essentially looking at content there or there. What is the logic in the 21st century of regulating them differently? And I think that's the elephant in the room.
Where people can be publishing stuff online and you simply can't trace who it is. So for example, injunctions on Twitter, where you've got these accounts, you've got Twitter accounts called things like Super Injunction Sleuth and stuff like that, and they can get hundreds of thousands of followers, and it's very hard to stop them because of anonymity and also because of geographical boundaries.
I think there's a big difference between, first of all, publications run by companies like Hearst and Bauer in our case that are huge, big media conglomerates that have print publications and websites and all of that, and they're all part of the PCC and they're all happy to be regulated and are regulated quite rightly as well as the legal issues. And then there's been between that and then, Twitter, for example, and someone coming along and saying these people have issued injunctions because so and so's naming them
Yeah.
having an affair with so and so. By the way, half of those, remember, famously, this happened,
Yeah.
were wrong.
Yeah.
They were wrong.
Yeah.
They weren't true. And
Yeah.
I'm friends with a couple of those people
Yeah.
who were besmirched on Twitter. You know, I happen to know those people, and they were absolute. You know, was on the verge of that's what's ruining people's lives. You know, is lies being told about them on Twitter and on totally unregulated internet. So there's a difference between we're very happy for our website to be regulated. I'm sure Digital Spies and Mumsnet and all of that. But we're big players, you know, in the in fact the internet is we're still publishing, you know. There's not really much difference. But some unknown person gratuitously publishing a lie on Twitter and then it being kind of publicised within about an hour around that's the real thing, and I don't know how legally and how anyone can monitor that and make sure it doesn't happen. In fact, they can't, can they? It's always going to happen.
But that's the difficulty. That's the, you as a publisher complain about lies being published, and here we have the dilemma in the UK law of libel. That's what they're designed to deal with. In America, the First Amendment, there's nothing you can do about it, and we have to decide as a society whether we object to lies. What can you do? Can you do something about it, or do we say like the Americans? There's nothing to do.
The author or the real publisher should be the people who are legally responsible for what they write and what they publish, not the platform that happens to host it.
But the trouble is that you said earlier you weren't sure whether you should be obliged to release the identity of
Well,
those
I'm not
people.
sure. I think it's an interesting question. I
But
think it's an interesting question.
but the point is, if you accept that the author should be the person liable, that's a no value.
The reason why I'm not sure is this, okay? I think if someone breaks the law and the police requires me to give information, that's fine. But what if a vexatious litigant or a company that doesn't like what someone says about their product, what if they come and ask me to provide that information?
Well, but they
And
don't.
it's that chilling they do all the time.
Well, hang on. Hang on. Can I just make a point? Because with respect, the important thing is you don't have to. And in the end, the arbiter is whether you should or you shouldn't is a judge.
Okay.
So the authorities do make that decision.
Well, if they are threatening me with a libel suit, then whether I have to or not, the effect is quite a chilling effect. Is that what I'll end up doing is taking off that content. So if someone says, I bought this pushchair, it's crap, and my child got squashed in it, no one ever buy it. Company writes to me and says, I want that person's name and I'm going to sue you if you don't do it. What do? If you don't take it down? I take it off.
I understand that, but forgive me, I picked you up because what you said is that I think the author should be liable. So if that is your view, then a for sure, the authorities must have a way of making that stick, and that's the point. You can't have your cake and eat it.
No. Can I not let that go? Because the truth is, the law doesn't say it that way. Unfortunately, company X, which is evil, can sue me, not just the author, and that's the law we need to change.
Well, no. They can't because the case is lodged with the Demon Internet. And the point, what the law says, is that the user-generated content is freely publishable until you elect to keep it, at which point you become a publisher.
I think at this point we need to move on. We need to move on, and then we need to get you to give some pro bono legal advice afterwards.